The Hollywood Unapologetic podcast with Orlando Delbert, Filmmaking Essentials. We hear about 3 body problems, budget, what was it, like $29.1 million an episode?
Yeah, something like that. A huge number.
It really makes you pause, especially when you think about these incredibly visually rich shows like Altered Carbon getting canceled after only a couple of seasons.
Right. It begs the question, what's really going on behind the scenes? What metrics are platforms like Netflix actually using?
Exactly. It feels like there's more to it than just, who's watching week 1.
Oh, definitely. And that's what's so interesting. While the huge budgets grab headlines, a show's actual survival can often depend on things that aren't quite so obvious.
We looked at Reddit discussions where people are really trying to figure out Netflix's logic on renewals and cancellations.
Yeah, some really insightful threads there.
Plus articles looking at their content strategy, pieces discussing the challenges for the new Hollywood generation of filmmakers.
And we also drew from Orlando Delbert's work, his book, Pollyanna's Tear-Soaked Battlefields of Hollywood.
Okay, so connecting all these threads, our mission here is to get a clearer picture of how these streaming giants evaluate success. It's obviously way more complex than just counting eyeballs.
Way more. And one metric that keeps coming up, especially in those Reddit discussions, is the completion rate.
Ah, right. Not just how many started watching, but how many actually finished the whole season.
Precisely. The example people kept bringing up was 1899.
Okay, yeah. From the creators of Dark, so there was a lot of anticipation there.
Huge initial interest. People clicked play, definitely, because Dark was so beloved,
Built-in audience, high-concept mystery. It had buzz.
But according to those Reddit analyses, the completion rate was apparently quite low, something like only 32%.
Wow, okay. So less than a third of the people who started actually saw it through.
And that seems to be a huge factor for Netflix. A low completion rate, even with high initial sampling, suggests the show didn't really hook people for the long haul.
Which means they're less likely to come back for season 2 or even stick around on Netflix generally.
Exactly. A finished season signals real investment from the viewer. It's a much better predictor of future behavior, or so the thinking goes. It suggests loyalty.
So, getting viewers to the finish line matters more than just the initial splash.
Seems like it. And they contrasted 1899 with something like Heartstopper.
Right, which maybe didn't have the same massive launch numbers initially.
Potentially lower, yeah. But reports suggest a very high completion rate. People who started it, loved it, finished it, talked about it.
Creating a different kind of value. A dedicated, growing fan base.
Exactly. That high completion rate suggests potential for growth, justifying renewal even without blockbuster numbers right out of the gate. It points to engagement.
So the takeaway from those discussions is, unless you're a mega hit like Stranger Things or Wednesday, where the sheer volume is undeniable.
Right, where the budget demands that massive audience.
For many other shows, demonstrating that deep audience connection through completion rates can be the key to survival.
It's a different path to proving value, which, interestingly, brings us back to Altered Carbon.
Yeah, a show that looked absolutely incredible. I mean, the world building, the effects, it felt really premium.
It was reportedly one of Netflix's most expensive shows ever, at the time anyway. Lavish sets, groundbreaking effects. It even got Emmy nods for visual design.
So visually spectacular, critically recognized. Why cancel it after just 2 seasons? People were really invested in that world.
Well, the reports point to that classic equation, cost versus audience. Despite the acclaim and the visuals, the audience size apparently just didn't grow enough to justify that massive ongoing production cost.
So it comes back to the budget threshold again. Even stunning visuals aren't enough if the viewership doesn't scale proportionally to the expense.
It seems so. The economics have to make sense, especially for something that expensive. It couldn't just be a cult hit. It needed bigger numbers.
And speaking of expense, 3 body problem. That $29.1 million per episode number is just huge. Even higher than early estimates, right?
Significantly higher, yeah. And you can kind of see why, potentially. Complex sci-fi source material, the need for really cutting-edge CGI for the virtual reality stuff.
And big names involved, like some Game of Thrones alumni, that always adds to the cost.
Absolutely. All those factors pile up. Plus things like extensive location shooting, intricate costumes. It's a massive undertaking. High-end TV is just incredibly expensive now.
Although, didn't one article mention something about the UK offering tax reimbursements?
Yeah.
Helping offset some costs?
Yeah, there are often tax incentives for filming in certain locations like the UK. The chairman of Framestore, the VFX company, highlighted the economic benefits of that kind of production happening there. It definitely helps, but doesn't negate the fundamental high cost.
Okay, so all these decisions high budgets, focus on completion rates. They have a huge ripple effect on creators, right? This whole idea of the new Hollywood generation.
Exactly. It refers to filmmakers and writers trying to navigate this, well, frankly, very different landscape dominated by streamers. The old rules don't necessarily apply.
And the metrics we're talking about, like completion rates, directly influence the distribution strategies.
Yeah.
Like Netflix dropping whole seasons at once.
Right. The Reddit threads touched on this. The binge model creates a huge initial splash, but does it sustain conversation like a weekly release might? Does word of mouth build the same way for shows like Stranger Things or Wednesday compared to, say, older HBO models?
It's a different rhythm, more intense up front, maybe fades faster.
Potentially. And that's where someone like Orlando Delbert comes in. In his book, Pollyanna's Tear-Soaked Battlefields, he really hammers home that filmmakers need to think about distribution from day one.
It can't be an afterthought.
No way. And a big part of that survival is understanding the business realities. You need a plan for how your film or show actually reaches an audience in this streaming world. And critically, understand distribution and be ready to pitch it. Know your audience, know the platform, know how it fits.
He even talks about the kinds of loaded questions distributors might ask, right? Like you need to understand the subtext.
Exactly. What are they really asking when they question your budget or your casting choices? It's about understanding their business needs and potential risks. Being prepared for those conversations is crucial.
So if we loop back to Altered Carbon one more time, using this lens.
Okay.
Visually groundbreaking, cool concept, clearly had fans, but canceled.
Given everything we've discussed, its extremely high costs likely made its performance metrics, particularly completion rates, though we don't have the exact numbers absolutely critical.
If people weren't finishing those expensive seasons in large enough numbers.
Then the justification for pouring more money into another season becomes really, really difficult for Netflix, even with the visual awards and critical praise. The value proposition, from their perspective, wasn't strong enough.
It really highlights how this new Hollywood generation has to be so much more aware. It's not just about having a great idea or script.
Not anymore. You have to understand the platform's business model, the metrics they value, the distribution strategy. You need to think like a business person as much as an artist, almost.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the big takeaway for you listening, whether you're making stuff or just watching it, is that these streaming decisions are complex. It's not just about what's popular this week.
Right. Completion rates, cost effectiveness, audience engagement metrics. These are critical pieces of the puzzle that the new Hollywood generation especially needs to grasp.
Which leaves us with a pretty interesting question to chew on. In this increasingly data-driven Hollywood, how do creators strike that balance? How do you protect your artistic vision while also satisfying the platform's need for measurable engagement and ultimately retention?
Yeah, what new kinds of stories or maybe even new ways of releasing them might emerge because of these pressures? It's something to think about.
You can find more insights on navigating the entertainment industry and achieving success in Orlando Delbert's work, including his book, Pollyanna's Tear-Soaked Battlefields of Hollywood, a survival guide against the cynicism and the hypocritical, and of course, the Hollywood Unapologetic platform. And always remember, you are the key to your own success. You are the new Hollywood generation.
Be informed, be prepared, and most importantly, be great.
That's it. Be great. Good luck out there.
See you next time.